Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.19 mid lane tier list. So for job content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. A lot of things have changed in the mid lane, predominantly the fact that AD assassins are very much underperforming on their current state. The items such as Profane Hydra, Yomu's, and Opportunity have all been nerfed pretty aggressively, and it's left AD assassins feeling pretty unreliable, oftentimes not being able to kill their target, especially with how easy it is to itemize health and armor in current League of Legends. On top of this, we've also seen the rise of more extended teamfight pattern orientated mages, the likes of Asol, Swain, and Nivea doing really well at the moment. Veigar also on that list. AP assassins are doing a bit better than AD assassins. They do have the fallback pattern of Storm Surge being really strong at the moment, but Lichbane looks to be a bit weaker as a first item rush on them, so they aren't doing as well as some of the other mages which are really benefiting from Storm Surge at its current power level. But let's get into the tier list. So the D tier is going to consist of relatively similar champions to last patch. We have the likes of Corki, who is very much quite heavily underperforming. He has been bad for a while now. He was dominant in competitive, which is why he has been nerfed so aggressively in solo queue. Trying to get him out of there has just been a bit of a battle, and obviously the fact that he had such great wave clear, he paired really nicely with the AP jungle meta, he had really good trading patterns, just enabled him to be really strong in that kind of environment. Same goes for the likes of Tristana. She obviously got reworked going into this patch, trying to nerf down her ability to just automatically push every single wave and then look for roam, so trying to amp up her ability to be competitive in the bot lane. She was very weak on this patch release. She got hotfix buffed with Corki, who are doing a bit better at the moment, but still both D tier picks. I imagine there are some problems with the ADC itemization for both these champions. That is being addressed in 14.20. Yeah, both these picks definitely underperform at the moment. Same goes for Ezreal. He's been underperforming in the mid lane for a while now, mostly because they've just nerfed a lot of the systems around the ADC marksman picks. Smolder also here. Obviously, Smolder has the fullback pattern of Grasp. They are nerfing Grasp in 14.20 as extended team fights and extended trading patterns really benefited that rune. If you're able to rotate another 1-2 stacks, that's another plus 14 health that can be really valuable and oftentimes alter some ways lanes are completely played. Sworder, I'm not a fan of this champion. I find he completely warps the game around him. Oftentimes, if you're on his team, you find yourself playing around his 225 stack mark and making sure you get that execute before he feels really valuable on that team. When he's on the enemy team, you find yourself being forced to kind of really play around this win combat they have, which in a way can function and it can be a fine thing, but it feels quite polarizing, and Smolder, when he's weak, feels really bad to have on your team as you're just really waiting for this kind of thing to happen. Whereas if he's on the enemy team, then oftentimes you feel like you're winning, but then it can be quite pressuring. Overall, not a fan of the current state of this champion. I would like to see maybe some power siphoned away from that and maybe just put back into his early laning in a way that doesn't make him oppressive in lane, but it's kind of hard for them to find that mark at the moment, so he sits within the D tier. Azir, not for competitive. This champion is mostly going to stay in the D tier for as long as he's in the game, unless other champions supersede him and become more modern day better champions, but as of now that hasn't happened. Azir still an incredibly big pro play problem, so he stays relatively weak in solo queue. Talon and Kiana are solo queue champions and they're bad at the moment. Lethality itemization, predominantly Profane Hydra, is really weak at the moment, and both these champions have taken a big hit from it. Kiana, it's more understanding if she was like a CD tier pick, as she's very elite skewed. Talon, still elite skewed, isn't as aggressively elite skewed and shouldn't be here. Like, Talon is definitely weak at the moment, so it would be nice to see some sort of buff towards their itemization or buff towards them directly to try and help them out in their current spots. Akshan, really underperforming at the moment. I don't believe it is correct that this champion's first item rush should probably be Hubris in its current state. That feels really bad. Obviously, it means you're just reliant on snowballing. If you don't get early kills or people aren't giving you kills, then that feels really, really rough to play with. Itemization for ADC champions as well at the moment is really expensive. The likes of Collector and IE, so much gold you need to buy these items, which can feel really rough. We've seen some like lethality variations, we've seen some like opportunities, some Yomus, but overall, the action's just underperforming in his current state, so he sits within my C tier. Zed, also a victim of assassin itemization being relatively weak, so he also comes down to the C tier. Yasuo is getting buffed in 14.20. There are some build variations worth testing out. I've actually been testing some Yuntao's Wild Arrows second on Yasuo. It's a bit less damage than IE. Obviously IE is gonna more consistently be available as like just a raw damage option. Yuntao's requires a bit more weaving, making sure you're getting that bleed and then continuously weaving that back in. It does less damage, yes, but it is 400 gold cheaper, so you can obviously itemize a bit more, towards some more items earlier, whether that's like your shield bows. I mean, Zerk is obviously you pick up quite early, but it can enable you to spike a bit sooner within the game. The other problem is the other benefit of Yuntao's, though, is the fact that the itemization path is a bit better. Being able to pick up a cloak, a long sword, and go into Noon Quiver feels a lot nicer than sitting on a pickaxe and then like a cloak. BF sword, obviously Yuntao's does have a BF sword within its build path, but overall it feels a bit better to curve into, and I think there's definitely potential with it, so give it a try. Other than that, Yasuo notes being Bork Crush looks to be the best option on him, and then yeah, Yuntao's IE shield bow is like a third slot. You can kind of be a bit more flexible after that point. Grasp looks to be his best keystone at the moment. Fleet, Lethal look to be a competitive with each other, and obviously kind of competitive with Grasp. He does have a bit of like room to kind of branch out depending on what team comp he's playing into, but overall he does sit within my C tier for the moment. Katarina has been underperforming ever since he did those changes to her and then nerfed her back down. She sits within my C tier. Weirdly enough, Katarina's best build path looks like it's Bork into Kraken, because Kraken's second item spike looks really good on her. Is this correct for the champion? Probably not. I think a lot of people do complain about AD Katarina, and rather it was just gone, and so AP Katarina could have a bit more power, or maybe keep AD Katarina but like nerf the on hits. But there's been some like different discussions there, from what I remember. Overall, I think AP Katarina should be the predominant way you play this champion. It should be something like Storm Surge on this pick, as she obviously wants to burst targets down. She's a bit weak at the moment, so she does sit within my C tier. Aurelia. So Aurelia was doing relatively fine last split, but we then obviously did a bunch of adjustments to her, made her a bit more elite skewed, which was fine. They then nerfed Bork, which was not so fine for her, and then into this season, her itemization has been nerfed pretty heavily again, and she drops down to the C tier. She's definitely underperforming at the moment. Twisted Fate is in a pretty rough spot, so he went up to my A tier. I was quite happy with where he was. They did a buff to his Q, which really helped him, enabled him to trade and clear waves a bit better, but his itemization has taken a huge hit this patch. He doesn't have great first items at the moment. We've obviously seen things like AP variations, we've seen AD variations, we've seen Roa variations, Lichbane, Shredia. There's different things you can go on him, but overall he's just not performing very well, so he drops all the way down to the C tier. Fizz, albeit the win rate doesn't suggest this champion's that bad, I don't think Fizz is a very good pick in his current state. He's very early game skewed. If you don't get an early advantage, his champion falls off really hard. He really struggles into just the overall champion climate at the moment. Obviously, if you pick him into matchups where he's really good, like sort of ASO as like an example, he could definitely thrive, and he could definitely stable the game and be really strong within those situations. But overall, in his current state, he's definitely not performing up to par and should probably be buffed down the line. Aurora. So Aurora is a very high skill ceiling champion, making sure you're like utilizing your full kit to its advantage, your spacing, your ultimate to either avoid ganks or just look for those all-in angles. This champion has a lot of skill and expression to it, which is very good to see. I do believe that the win rate is kind of lying at the moment. It sits at something like a 47, but this pick definitely has a lot more potential than that. Is it a bit more elite skewed? Yes. This champion will definitely be better in the hands of players who are really understanding of this kind of a pick. It's not something I'm going to recommend so much for like Diamond to Gold, which is once again what these tier lists are targeted towards. But there are different build variations for likes of Ludens into Storm Surge. Looks like a really good burst variation. Malignance into Liandry looks like a really good dot plus like ult kind of playing around build variation, which definitely has its benefits as well. So look at the builds, try and learn the pick. I wouldn't really recommend just instantly going into ranked with this kind of a champion, but she's definitely got potential, so very deserving of a B tier spot compared to what her win rate might suggest. Yone, there are different build variations of this champion. Obviously, he's being buffed in 14.20. I don't think he needs it. This kind of a pick has so much skill involved with it, and if played correctly, can win most lanes, which can feel really oppressive to play against when he does scale really aggressively as well, and has a great amount of crowd control and safety within his kit. As like if you sink a lot of time into Yone, he definitely rises up quite aggressively in the tier list. I have him in the B tier, mostly because I also don't think this champion's great for gold to diamond. There are considerably easier to pilot picks, which can be more rewarding with like 5 to 10 games, whereas Yone, you want to put like 100 to like 1,000 games into him to really find his like level of strength. Which, I mean, if you have that time, please do. Like, this pick is incredible if you put a lot of time into it, but yeah, there are other easier picks, and I would recommend them over him at the moment. Obviously, when he gets buffed, I do think this champion will jump up to the A tier, and in Elite, he will probably be the premier AD champion, unless some of the others, which are getting buffed, like, do a bit better than him. But overall, yeah, Yone, very deserving of a B tier spot at the moment. Jace stays within my B tier. Not much to it. The itemization didn't really change that much on him. He stays relatively neutral and stays within my B tier. Echo has been on a downward spiral for a while. The Lich Bane nerfs ended up being pretty negative to him, and yeah, he drops from the A tier to the B tier. Vladimir, so now that people have finally got sort of grasped WMAX Vladimir, it's been bad for a while. Well, I mean, ever since the changes primarily, but it'd been bad before then. Like, it was not something you could go in every game. In fact, it was like decent in like 10-20% of games, but people were going it like 80% of the time. Which is crazy to think about, because it had its strengths, but when you default on it, it loses like its identity in a way, which really hurt the kind of play style. Riot obviously wanted to nerf it, get rid of it. It wasn't healthy for the game, rightfully so. So go back to Phase Rush, go back to Airy. Storm Surge looks like a really good rush item on Vladimir at the moment, so definitely look into that. I think this pick has a bit more potential than maybe my tier list placement leads on. But yeah, B tier feels like a good spot for him at the moment. Once people move over to correct itemization and correct rune choices, I definitely think this champion could rise up through the tier list. Orianna, so Orianna's doing fine. I think I would describe her as a pick which does a bit better in Elite for the most part. Tends to be very reliant on utilizing her Q to manipulate the way lanes and team fights are played out. If you can land multi-man shockwaves, this pick can be really valuable, and there's definitely a lot of strength to a champion like this. I think she comes as being quite vulnerable in lane though. She has very low base armor. She hasn't got any great escape tools outside of like a speed boost on the W and obviously the self peel on the ultimate, which can leave her quite vulnerable. But the assassins are a bit weaker at the moment. Her damage is a bit low compared to some of the healthier targets though, which can definitely feel quite painful, especially if you're having to constantly rotate abilities and putting yourself in danger in those kind of like situations. Zoe looks to be doing quite a bit better at the moment with Lich Bane Rush. She is really benefiting from the strength of that item. I believe for a while, Lich Bane Rush has been good on Zoe. People just hadn't really caught on to just how powerful it was. This champion, obviously, very dominant in China. We've known this for a while. But, yeah, in the West, she's finally beginning to see some play. And, yeah, it looks to be pretty good on the Lich Bane Rush variations. Pantheon. Man, I wish I could put this champion in the C tier. I don't like Pantheon in his current state. I think he definitely has strengths, but the pick overall falls off pretty aggressively. If you ever find yourself behind in lane or against like lane opponents which understand where your strengths really lie, it feels really hard to ever get advantages on this kind of a champion. In the top lane, I think it's more polarizing. The longer lane can definitely be quite punishing for Pantheon, especially if he is like chain ganked early on to the game and really put in a spot where he just can't really access or do anything in the lane matchups. In mid lane, he has more roam potential, which could definitely ease up some of the problems which he has, but I do think this champion is at a pretty bad spot, and I'm glad he's being buffed in 14.20, because I would be pretty close to putting him in the C tier in his current state. Like, whereas Yone, I think, has great potential, Pantheon, I don't think has great potential. I think this champion is pretty lackluster in its current state. Ziggs doing a bit better. He jumps from the C tier to the B tier. Ziggs has a great amount of flex capability, being both a good bot laner and mid laner, especially in competitive. In solo queue, you lose a lot of that value, and I think mid lane Ziggs is just a weaker version of some of the other artillery focused mages, being the likes of Vel'Koz or Zera, for example, and honestly some of the other ones which just have good inherent range, like Asol, for example, just has good range, which can make him feel quite oppressive from those kind of distances. Ziggs does do good burst damage, which he definitely has the edge over on Asol. Ludent's companion can feel really nice on this champion. But overall, I'm not a fan of Ziggs compared to some of the other options, but he's still a decent pick, deserving of a B tier spot. Akali, high B, low A tier. This champion obviously has great carry potential if you're able to really find your snowball within the lane or within just the game in general. Getting those first items, you can be really oppressive in team fights, looking to target out 1 or 2 champions, and then using that to win fights and take over the games. This pick can be really valuable. It's a bit harder to execute than some of the other champions, and it definitely has its shortcomings if you're not ahead of the curve, and it will fall off oftentimes if, once again, you're not getting those itemization points, which you really spike on, which, really prohibits her from, the higher tiers. But I do think she is very close to be A tier, and, if you consider, if you want to consider an A tier pick, that's fine. I mean, she could very much comfortably be there, especially the higher up you go in ranks. Garen lost a lot of power this patch. He was one of the biggest losers in the game from the itemization changes. His core got really heavily hit. I believe people should be looking towards Deadman's as a solid second or third item. Maybe not second, but third looks really good for Deadman's. And yeah, try and figure out what kind of itemization you want to go for, but Garen is definitely a lot weaker at the moment, so he does drop from the S tier to a B tier option. He is still very good into melee matchups, and oftentimes can really be quite dominant in those, especially when assassins are as weak as they are in most of the current spots. So yeah, Garen, very deserving of B tier, but should probably be a bit higher. He is definitely on the weaker side at the moment. Morgana. So Morgana definitely has some great matchups she can be picked into if you can get great value out of Black Shield and you have the setup. This champion can be really good within the game. As a standalone pick, I'm not a huge fan. It's obviously unreliable. Her kit is just very mismatched with each other. You want to be close range for the ultimate to function, but her W and Q want her to be at distance. If you get closer, you will oftentimes find yourself very vulnerable, and obviously some people like that difference in play pattern. There can definitely be strengths to it. It gives you tools for different scenarios, but in the end it just ends up meaning that your ult really loses a lot of value unless you are willing to put yourself in danger to get those kind of angles. Overall, Morgana, sits as a B tier pick. If you have the setup and you have the correct matchups, you can definitely rise up as a closer to A tier pick, but for the moment, I'm going to leave her in the B tier. Moving on to the A tier event, so we have Gragas leading us off. This champion tends to be a bit elite skewed, but still has great amounts of damage, has great wave clear, has just great tools for a lot of different scenarios. You want to put a lot of games into him, and you should definitely, if you like Gragas, then you should definitely do that. And he has, lots of burst tools, lots of different tools for different situations, and I think this champion very deserving of an A tier spot. Malphite. This is, AP Malphite is of course viable, and I know a lot of people will only play AP Malphite when you are playing him in the mid lane. If you do that, he probably drops down to the B tier. If you're playing tank Malphite, however, it can be great in a lot of scenarios. Obviously, AP Malphite will be what you predominantly go into AP matchups, tank Malphite into those heavy AD compositions where you're not going to get the value, you're going to get a lot of value out of the armor stacking, and I recommend if you do flex those kind of options, then Malphite can be a very good mid lane pick and definitely a great champion for your arsenal, especially with how easy this pick is to pilot. Renekton primarily played into Yasuo and Yone and other assassins for the most part, but they are the 2 most popular champions in the mid lane at the moment, so why not? Renekton, great pick into those champions, use them as a counter, and you should find yourself having a lot of success. Do I recommend blinding him for mid lane? No, probably not. But if your top lane is willing to flex around with you, and Renekton is something you can bounce between both lanes, then I do think this champion has a lot of potential in the mid lane. LeBlanc obviously got nerfed in 14.18, I believe. She is doing fine this patch. She definitely relies on snowballing, kind of akin to Akali. I think she has a bit more safety net, which is why I have her a bit higher as a champion. And I do think she is obviously harder to pilot within the lane. And has relatively similar issues to Akali for the most part. You can look to just be harass and on these team fights, and that's like where you can find your value within these games. Akali, a bit more reliant on all-inning. LeBlanc has a fullback pattern. I'd say Akali doesn't really have as much of one, so that is where I'd really differ the two champions. Nico. So Nico is going to be with my A tier. Champion has great CC, great damage, tends to be a bit more early game skewed. If you can utilize her W effectively, this champion can be really oppressive in different situations. There's a lot of hidden mechanics to that spell, whether that's tower shot manipulation, being using the W to do scouting, and using it to I believe there's one other thing where you can manipulate how you play around the wave with it. APA made a video on it not too long ago, definitely something worth checking out. Actually, I said not too long ago, it might be previous worlds, but it's still kind of applicable to current situations. Overall, Nico, great A tier pick. Pretty unpopular though. Tilia doing fine in the mid lane at the moment. Once again, another very stock standard mage. Has good wave clear, has good damage, has good setup. Her ult is a great roaming tool. Can also really manipulate how you play around objective fights. So there's definitely a lot of strengths to this champion. Do I think she's S tier? No, I think she's a pretty solid A tier pick. Kind of locked to this position for the most part. Vel'Koz, a decent artillery champion. I think Vel'Koz is kind of slept on for the most part, and has definitely over time people have become a bit more aware that this champion is pretty strong, especially with the buffs it received a while ago, amping up his passive, making his combos feel a bit more consistent in the damage they output. Neferi, so Neferi, I think that's what her name is. This champion has dropped from the S plus to the A tier. The itemization obviously was quite bad for, nerf was quite bad for her. She is very dominant in low elo as being a very stat sticky assassin. The higher up you go, the more this champion just aggressively falls off. You don't really see Neferi Diamond plus. This champion already begins to fall off by the time you get there. But if you are looking for something to get from gold to diamond, she's still a great option. She's just not anywhere near as strong as she was. But I'd say she was OP in 14.18 for that kind of elo bracket. Now I'd just say she is strong, a solid A tier pick. Victor has been slept on for a while. This champion is pretty good. Obviously, he can feel slow to come online, and that is definitely where some of his weaknesses lie. And into champions which can kind of space him on the E and don't really need to get in range of his Qs, so he can't really trade with that kind of ability. It can be quite punishing to play this pick, but definitely doing a lot better than what people think at the moment. And I think this champion's kind of slept on. Rise, finally not being slept on. Rise has been on the rise for a while. This pick has definitely been doing a lot better with the itemization, the buffs he's been receiving. And I really do think Rise is a champion I'd recommend people learn. The fact that he hasn't seen competitive honestly surprises me. I think this champion could definitely be viable within that sort of environment. Obviously, Syndra or Orianna kind of hurt him, as they are champions which do outrange him and can oftentimes space him if he is not able to consistently get in range and utilize the tools he has, whether that's the movement speed on the passive or phase rush. Stuff like that can feel quite punishing. I do think he's also very good as a flex pick in the top lane, so if you play a bit of mid and a bit of top, Rise, definitely a great champion to add to your arsenal. Kassadin, finally in a position where he is, I can recommend him again. Kassadin had been weak for the entirety of last bit, which was unfortunate, but now he's definitely back as a good option. The games being a bit more extended in duration, less burst damage, enables him to more consistently scale, and he's once again deserving of an A tier spot. Lissandra, honestly, also kind of slept on. This pick obviously tends to come out more as a counter to assassins and mages, which are very reliant on their burst. If you can find those angles, then this pick can be great for its lockdown and for its safety net in that ultimate. And overall, Lissandra, I do think this champion is kind of slept on in its current state, very deserving of an A tier spot, just no one really plays it. Ari doing a bit better after her buffs. They buffed her E quite aggressively, and she's really benefited from that, so very deserving of an A tier spot. The itemization stayed relatively neutral for her as well, so you're still looking at the likes of Malignance, Inter, kind of some different variations. With like a lot of the majors here, Storm Surge is very good in its current state. The likes of Nico, Lissandra, LeBlanc, Ari, Akali, all these champions really value that item. Same goes for like Gragas. Yeah, Storm Surge, really good in its current state. Very much should be something people look to go in maybe like 50-60% of their games, especially when they are snowballing. Same goes for Silas. Storm Surge looks really good on him. Obviously, Lich Bane looks a bit weaker. Roa, still a very solid itemization point, but Storm Surge Rush, definitely something which you have access to at the moment. Great as a counter pick. Falls a bit more flat if you're not using him as a counter pick, which is what I'd say some of his weaknesses lie, but he's still a very good champion. Silas is a very good A tier pick. Wei is one of the premier AP mages of the patch in Elite. I think he's a bit weaker in mid and mid to low elo, so I don't have him as like an S tier option. But if you put the time into Wei, he is one of the best champions in the game at the moment, so definitely be aware of this. He has great damage, he has great tools for most situations. He's progressively just been climbing and climbing and climbing as more mastery has gone into the pick, combined with some just direct buffs towards the champion, whether that's through itemization, through other champions being nerfed, or through him being buffed. Like, there's just a lot of things which have gone well for Wei, and he very much deserves a high A tier spot at the moment. Syndra, also doing really well at the moment. The buffs she received not too long ago have helped her. Like, VR buffs were really good, and combined with the itemization being a bit stronger for her, she very much deserves an A tier spot. And also, akin to Wei, is one of the premier AP champions of high elo. Cassiopeia, great as a counter pick. I wouldn't really recommend playing her outside of matchups where she can really abuse them for their like lack of range. Into higher range matchups in the mid lane, she will get punished. They can easily they don't need to really get in range to be continuously Q harassed into like obviously your E and then miasma, ult drop, stuff like that, which like really enables you to be strong in those melee lanes. Cassiopeia does fall a bit flat in those, and that is also kind of like Silas, where some of her weaknesses lie. Both these champions are very good, not doing realistically, but like in those counter pick spots, just have kind of like things which like answer them. And yeah, whether that Silas is not being really reliant on like good ultimates, or Cassiopeia is reliant on melee or like lanes which she can space more aggressively. Diana. So Diana has dropped from the S tier finally. This champion had been really good for a while. Like for 2 splits, I think Diana had been an S tier pick in the mid lane. Very early game skewed, very reliant on her harass and then all-in potential. She's a bit weaker now with the item Lich Bane being nerfed. That has definitely hurt her, kind of similar to a lot of the other Lich Bane users. I think that item definitely got hit a bit harder than some of the other options, so they definitely lost a bit of power there. And Diana, yeah, drops from the S tier down to the A tier now. Annie and Malzahar are both very easy picks to play. Obviously have very cookie cutter playstyles. Malzahar has great wave clear, great lockdown. Annie has great burst damage, and Tibbers is an incredibly valuable summon. They are not quite S tier picks, but they are very close to it, especially in mid and low elo. I think if you put the time in to like really learn, you don't even really need to put a huge amount of time in. Like if you put like 10 games into these picks, then you should find pretty consistent good results all the way up until like masters for the most part on these picks. So yeah, definitely put some time into these champions, especially if you're just looking for quick ways to gain some LP. These two can be really valuable within that space. And then my other 2 niche picks at the moment are Heimerdinger and Cho'Gath. I think Heimerdinger is very strong, has been for a while. This pick has like 3 role flex potential. Do think support is a bit weaker than his other 2 roles at the moment, but the itemization has been good for him for a while. Like the entirety of last split, I was really recommending people play Heimerdinger. Veigar V2 finally played Heimerdinger yesterday. Obviously, that was pretty funny to watch, and he did win the game, so that was good to see. But yeah, this pick definitely has a lot of potential. I do think Heimerdinger is very much slept on. And yeah, put some games into him and you should be rewarded. Cho'Gath is a great tank option for the mid lane. Obviously his passive means that he has a great amount of sustain. My thing has bugged, so I'm going to have to draw the rest with arrows. Actually, I'll just drag the final result over because I have it on my second monitor. So, yeah, so Cho'Gath, really good pick at the moment. This champion really benefiting from less damage in the game. Utilizing his passive is great for its current for like the harassment of the other mages provide. Obviously, into extended fights, he can sometimes feel quite bad, especially if the enemy team has tools to like make sure that he can never really approach them. The likes of Swain, Anivia, Veigar can all feel quite bad for Cho'Gath, especially if Veigar's just free stacking of the champion. So he does lose to some of the S and S plus options, but generalistically, he's a great mid lane pick. Vex is a great anti-dash champion, and I really do recommend people put some time into Vex, because this pick has been on the rise for a while. We've obviously seen it in competitive, and it's looked pretty bad there, but yeah, this champion is great for solo queue, and I do really recommend her in situations like LeBlanc, Kiana, Yasuo, Yone. She can really dominate those matchups, and she definitely has a lot of strength in those situations. Brand, honestly, I had Brand and Malzahar in like different positions, like up until 5 minutes before I like locked this list. I do think these champions are to a degree interchangeable. I just rate Brand slightly higher than Malzahar at the moment. I think his overall damage, like AoE damage, is like high enough, and AoE DPS is like high enough that it should definitely be something people look into. Obviously he's been nerfed indirectly because of jungle a slight bit. He's still very strong in the mid lane though, especially in those lower ranks. I really do recommend people put some time into playing Brand. Seraph is my recommended go-to artillery mage alongside Lux. Both these picks have incredible amounts of damage. If you ever find yourself like 3-4-0 within lane, oftentimes you can just one-shot the enemy laner if you land your like Zeraph's case, like EWQ combo into open up with R can feel really oppressive for people to play against. Lux can oftentimes just one-shot people with like Q, passive, E, R rotation combos, and that can feel really, once again, oppressive to play against. And when you're like doing this on repeat and then one-tapping the wave, enabling you to roam across the map, this champion is really good at the moment. I'm glad people have finally caught on to just how strong Lux is, as this pick has been very much slept on for a while. I say slept on. People do play a lot of Lux. Like, she is a very popular both support and mid lane in her current state, but like better players, the higher elo players have finally caught on to that. Like, you know, there's a lot of strength for this champion, and I really do recommend people like put some time into her, as I do believe she is viable up into Masters Plus. There's definitely room for her being played there. Galio drops from my S plus to the S tier. He's still very strong. Like, when some of the other champions surrounding him are being nerfed, like Anivia, Swain, Veigar, and Aso are all being nerfed in 14.20. I do think Galio will probably make the jump back up into S plus tier, but he is slightly weaker than the S plus options at the moment. So yeah, he drops down to the S tier, but still has great itemization, still the same strengths he had in the previous patch. In Nasus's case, he is doing a bit better this patch. Extended games enables him to just stack a bit more consistently, and less damage in the game allows him to skirmish for a bit longer. Overall, those two things have really benefited him. Nasus doesn't scale as aggressively as some of the other options, the likes of ASOL and some of the S plus will kite him out and just like outscale him within those spaces. Like, Anivia can basically just deny Nasus from ever really existing in fights with her peeling tools, her wall, her Q, all very valuable. And then yeah, the S plus tier. So Veigar, Swain, and Anivia all are being nerfed in 14.20, rightfully so. All three of these picks massively benefited from the changes this patch. More health in the game, extended team fights, the itemization being some of the least nerfed in the game. Yeah, these three picks really thrive off that. Veigar has a load of itemization options available to him. Like, you can go all the way from like Luden's Roa to like Fimbulwinter, for example, and then Rabadon, Storm Surge is like second item. There's just so many things accessible to him at the moment that he's really thriving from that. Swain is a bit more cookie cutter. The likes of Rylai, Liandry make for a great 2-item core. You can be a bit more flexible after that, but you're mostly locked to things like Malignance or Blackfire Torch or Zonya. It really depends on what kind of things you want access to in the game. Blackfire tends to be a bit more niche, but anyway, I digress. Yeah, Swain really good at the moment. More extended team fights are great for him, especially when people don't have the damage to take him down, as he can continuously drain with his ultimate. In Anivia's case, she's the best, I'd say, yeah, the best mid laner of the patch at the moment. Obviously, she's not as popular as the likes of Veigar, so Veigar has the benefit of just being one of the most popular mid laners on the patch at the moment. But Anivia has great tools for... Hello? Oh, did my power just go out? No, my power didn't go out. Nice. Anyway, I'll leave that in at the end of the video. Anivia doing a lot better at the moment. This champion just has like great tools for being able to kite people out. Her damage is very high. She's deceptively strong early on to the game and still very good later on into the game. Has great control over objectives. Has great roaming if you're running the likes of Relentless Hunter. And yeah, I would have her as the premier mid laner of the patch, but both Swain and Veigar can fill the space as well. So yeah, you have options there for you. S plus, S tier, but all of these champions are great options, especially in like different situations. The A tier also still all very viable, and a lot of the A tier tend to tread a bit better when you go into elite. Like some of the S plus, S tier can slightly drop down, making room for the likes of Sindra, Hui, Silas, Rise, for example, LeBlanc. Also, all these picks can definitely come up the tier list. And yeah, those are my thoughts for the gold to diamond, low to mid elo tier list. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.